Hey guys, today I will show you how I prepare thumbnails for my paintings and how to transfer the image onto watercolor paper. I take a sheet of tracing paper and tape it to the screen and then trace the image with a fine liner. I use fine liners because they do not damage the screen as, say, a pen could do, and you can see the line after you apply the graphite onto the other side. If I want to make a bigger painting, let's say an A3, I will use 2 sheets of A4 to trace them one at a time and then stick them together with tape. That's in no way of how you must do it, it's just how I do it. After my outline is ready, I pass with a soft graphite pencil over the other side. I usually use a 4B or a 6B, and I use a woodless graphite, so it's easier to cover large parts. You can also have graphite sticks, they do a good job as well. I used to use transfer paper before, but I do not use it anymore because I've had the lines that I trace onto watercolor paper reject water and not let me put any paint on top, so that's a huge no, even though I had the brand that said it shouldn't do that. I tape my tracing paper to the watercolor paper and trace over the lines. I press very lightly, not to damage the tooth of the paper. It's a good idea to tape the tracing paper over your drawing, as you can always go back and see if you've missed any lines and retrace them, or just to check that you've got all the lines right. I tend to trace only the biggest shapes and then add the rest looking at the reference and adding the detail with a pencil. Now it's time for a thumbnail. I use the same traced image and make a sandwich of a sheet of paper I want to use for my thumbnail, transfer paper and tracing paper with the line work on top. I wanted to use transfer paper just to show you how to use it. So basically you put the graphite side down and you put the image on top. You can use a photo and you can transfer that on your paper, but be careful because the lines might be too bold and the graphite can smudge the paper easily. And once again, as I said, I had paint being rejected because it's water-based, like it's diluted with water, being rejected just because I used the transfer paper. It's a great idea to make a value thumbnail for any painting or drawing because it gives you a clear idea of lights and darks before you even start painting. In this video, I will show you how I make my color thumbnails that include also the value difference. This is the part when I decide what colors I want in my painting and see how they would look together. I use markers or colored pencils, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have the colors that you would like to use, because this thumbnail is going to be a rough sketch and probably you will change things along the way. That's what I do. I map out my color and then I look at darks and lights. With watercolor, you can make any colors transparent and as light as you want it to be, but the problem is that it loses the saturation. So to make my paintings look more juicy with color, I use contrast to bring out the light areas and deepen the shadows. That is, I arrange my colors from darkest to lightest, for example, yellow being the lightest and blue or purple, dark purple, being the darkest. I also like to use color mixes for example, for my purples or greens. I do use some pre-mixed colors from the palette that I have, but your painting is going to look more balanced if you use the mixes of, for example, the reds you're using with the blues you're using. Just make sure that they don't get muddy. And another thing I wanted to say, this doesn't involve the thumbnails, but about color selection. When I paint, I tend to paint the first layer, especially the first layer. I tend to paint all the areas separately and let each area dry before I start the area next to it. Like that, I avoid the colors being muddled together and producing some sort of gray or brown that you don't want in a colorful painting. So yes, this is my tutorial on how to trace and how to make a thumbnail. This is just how I do my thumbnails, and I hope you can take some tips and use some techniques. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer, so you can post them in comments under this video. Be sure to check out my other colorful doggies, and soon I will be doing a check-in, so I will be posting the video on YouTube soon as well. And yeah, like, subscribe and share. Thank you. Bye!